the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Hi, everyone. This is such a sweet podcast on the sacred window, this really important period for a woman that we talk about with one of our very favorite teachers at the Shakti School. She teaches in our program on pre and postnatal Ayurveda. We talk about a lot of practical things in this podcast with the beautiful, sweet Ashlee Sakaishi Wilkin. She is a founding instructor of the Center for Sacred Window Studies. She's also a mama, an Ayurvedic practitioner, massage therapist, and prenatal yoga teacher, birth and postpartum doula, and an awesome educator. We learn so much about her in this podcast. As I said, she is one of our most beloved teachers, and her topic is always so helpful and useful for women, especially those that want to conceive or who are pregnant and after how to take care of themselves after they've had the baby. So I hope you enjoy this podcast with me and Ashlee. Hello, everyone. I am Katie Silcox, your Ayurveda Gal Friday. I am here with one of what is becoming one of our favorite classes at the Shakti School with one of our new teachers, Ashlee Sakaishi Wilkin. And we're just so glad to have you, Ashlee. Welcome to Spirit Sessions.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Good. So first, before we dive into your specific offering, I'm curious what got you started in this path and on this route.
So I have always been fascinated with pregnant people and pregnant bellies. And I was fortunate enough to be a veterinarian's daughter. So I got to see birth in the context of animals like cows and dogs and cats. And so that kind of inspired me when I was really young to just be fascinated with the miracle of life and birth. And then as I got older and I studied nutrition in college, and then I studied Ayurvedic medicine at the California College of Ayurveda. And there we talked very briefly about pregnancy and postpartum. And I was fascinated because they talked about how Ayurveda had specific postpartum traditions. And that was something that I hadn't heard of anywhere else. And I recognized that that was something that we really needed, like humans really needed. And so it led me to studying with Isha Oakes, who was my teacher, and she taught me about Ayurvedic postpartum care. And it just I knew that that was the work that I was supposed to do in the world. And so I began working with families and really being in that liminal space of the postpartum window where there's just this opportunity, this huge opportunity for transformation to happen. And then I became a labor doula. And so I got to see the whole process of, pregnancy through birth and into the postpartum window. And for me, it's just hugely transformative. And it's also revolutionary work in my mind and in my heart. If we can change and shift the way people are cared for when they're pregnant and when they're birthing their babies, and then afterwards, the way that they are nourished and held within community as well as by individuals. And if we can change family culture and dynamics to really support birthing people to be nourished and taken care of, that could potentially change the world. So for me, this is both my heart's passion, but also my passion for the way that I can be a part of a shift in the cultural paradigm of the world that we live in.
Hmm. So, why don't you explain to us what Ayurveda says about this sacred window? What is the sacred window for those of us listening that have only heard of this for the first time?
Yeah, so the sacred window within the context of Ayurvedic medicine is the time period after a baby is born. And so it's kind of the acute phase of healing in the postpartum window, the first 6 to 8 weeks, depending upon how the birth goes. And so it's one of the times that are called a Kaya Kalpa within the context of Ayurvedic medicine. And a Kaya Kalpa is a body time. So it's a time when our body is going through a huge transformational shift where we can have a dramatic impact on the future health and well-being of the person going through that huge shift. So for female-bodied people, that happens when we start our first moon bleed, so our first menses or menstruation. It also happens every time that we have a baby after the baby is born, or it applies to anytime there's a miscarriage or an abortion. And then when we go through menopause. So it's these really powerful, like hormonal shift time periods for us with uteruses to dramatically impact how our reproductive system and our health and well-being is moving forward. And so within the context of Ayurvedic medicine for postpartum, it's this 6 to 8 week period where we have specific foods and practices and even herbal preparations and also a almost like a womb-like experience that we create around the birthing person and their family so that they can gestate and receive that deep nourishment in order to have that health. 42 days, we say, for 42 years of health.
I love that. 42 days for 42 years of health.
Yeah.
Is there a significance of that number? Is it 40 or 42?
It's 42. And the significance really is that in the process of Dhatu Parinama, which is the process of tissue formation within the context of Ayurvedic medicine, it takes about 42 days for all of the tissues to be nourished from the food we eat on day one, and then for that food to be transformed into ojas, or the last final essence of that food that's left over through the process of tissue formation. So it's the idea that at the end of those 42 days, like we have strong ojas that we've been building for the entire duration of those 42 days through the nourishing foods and practices and people that are supporting us in that sacred window time.
Yeah. And for our listeners, just so you understand, this Dhatu period that Ashlee's talking about, it's also human beings in general. And so what's super cool is you can also regenerate tissue and nourishment tissue in that 42-day window, even if you're not getting pregnant or after birth. So that's super cool. What do you think are the innate qualities of pregnancy that Ayurveda focuses on enhancing during that period?
Yeah, so during pregnancy specifically, there's like the Ayurvedic texts, the classical Ayurvedic texts, they talk about how during the different months of gestation, when the baby is being gestated and built, there are specific foods and like qualities that we want to enhance in the person's body. And so when we think about pregnancy in the West, oftentimes we're just like, they're pregnant. So they just keep doing everything that they were doing before, but now they take prenatal vitamins, or maybe they shift their diet a little bit, or maybe they shift their lifestyle practices as their pregnancy progresses, which hopefully that is happening, right? If you're doing CrossFit at the beginning of your pregnancy, you're probably not going to be doing CrossFit at the end of your pregnancy. And so we're shifting. And the principles that Ayurveda is really looking at is supporting the deeply feminine, nourishing qualities. And it's different depending upon which doshas are at play. So a person's constitution and what's happening with the seasons and what's happening with the climate, all of those things. But generally, we're bringing in more softness, more like slow, like sweet, beautiful qualities to enhance that slow, calm, sweet quality of the person who's pregnant as well as of the baby. And so the idea is that we take in everything through all five of our senses. And if we can surround ourselves with things that are like beautiful and sweet and soft and make us feel really good inside, make us feel like we're filled and surrounded by love, then that's what we're like building our baby with as well. So as our tissues are growing and being built in those weeks or so of pregnancy, also the babies are too. And so that's really, those are the qualities we're enhancing. So it's kind of like we're enhancing the kapha qualities, the earth and the water elements to really facilitate and support that deep, nourishing quality. And it's also this time for a lot of birthing people to like remother themselves, because not all of us had the parents or the mothering experience that we maybe needed, like that our soul or our spirit needed. And so it's this time where if we can support ourselves with those qualities, we're really like nourishing and remothering ourselves so that we can step into the parenthood journey with those qualities as kind of our foundation, like literally in our tissues of our body.
Mhm. Yeah, wouldn't it be so nice if we were all kind of in that sweetness beforehand? You know, I remember when I was young asking my mom when I first learned about what your mother experienced emotionally and what she ate and who she was with, aka your dad. Like that really affects how you grew and how you experienced yourself as you grew in the womb. And I was like, Mom, you know, what were you eating when I was in your body? And she said, all I could eat was French fries from Burger King and Dr. Pepper. And I just, oh, I'm so screwed. And then, you know, she's with my dad and I, you know, love my dad, but let's just say not the easiest person to be around and all the time. And I thought, wow, Dr. Pepper and French fries. But you can also see in that her body's attempt at kapha, at ojas, that sweetness of Dr. Pepper, that grounding fatty quality of ghee and potatoes in the form of McDonald's or Burger King French fries. And I think our moms did their best, you know, and so those of you out there listening, you know, I know also even prior to having the baby gestating, there are technologies that Ayurveda offers us that most Western women don't learn about even in the conception period. So would you say that there's also perhaps beyond the sacred window when we're attempting to boost our fertility, for example? I know you have one of the most popular classes at our school, by the way. And I think it's because so many women today, especially, are really, really having a hard time getting pregnant. So maybe speaking to, I know it's a huge, huge realm of study, but beyond that gestational window, the conception window as well.
Yeah, totally. So Ayurveda has like a whole protocol, like a whole process to supporting the process of conception. And it's really about preparing the body ahead of time. And for so many of us, myself included, like we sometimes get pregnant when we don't anticipate getting pregnant.
Yeah. You're like, I wasn't trying at all. Whoops.
Yeah. Or like I was trying for a while and then I stopped trying and like things happened, you know? So just like with everything with Ayurveda, we like take it with a grain of salt and we like can also look at what's happening in the present moment to adjust and bring ourselves back into balance, even if we weren't able to do the things ahead of time. So in regards to preconception work, Ayurveda, ultimately the goal is to get our bodies back into a state of homeostasis based on our specific constitution or prakriti. So the proportion of earth, water, fire, air, and ether elements and or the doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha based on what we were born with. Basically, when we were conceived, what happened with the sperm and the egg and what our genetics brought in and what our soul brought in. And so as somebody, like if you are trying to conceive, the process of getting yourself back into the state of balance, for some of us, it can be really simple. It can be as simple as like just shifting our diet and taking out the things in our diet that might be not as healthy or health giving for our bodies. So maybe if we are eating a lot of French fries from Burger King and Dr. Pepper, like looking at those qualities, just like you so beautifully did, Katie, and instead preparing potatoes at home with a fat that works really well for our body. So whether that's ghee or olive oil or whatever, could be lard, even if your body does really well with lard, but really facilitating and supporting our bodies to be in a receptive state. And sometimes that like getting to that receptive state means that we have to do a little bit of a cleansing process. And so Ayurveda can and does bring in the concept of panchakarma, which is the process of eliminating the doshas from their root out of our bodies. And that's something that can be a more involved process. So that's something where you could go to an Ayurvedic center and go through a whole panchakarma. And typically it means that your partner also would go through that process because it takes both sperm and egg to make a baby. And so it's not just all on us as uterus bearers to be the ones that are responsible for making our bodies as ideal of a space as possible for a baby to be born or for a baby to be conceived. And so it's this multi-week, multi-month processes of preparing the body, preparing the doshas, and then eliminating the doshas, and then regenerating or replenishing the body afterward. And for those that can't afford to do something like a panchakarma, because it can be expensive and it can be hard to block out that amount of time, like at least 3 weeks, if not like 3 months of time, even just doing like a simple dietary, like a khichdi cleanse. Like I know, Katie, you offer like different like cleanses, or you support people through the cleansing process. So doing those cleanses 3 months before you're wanting to conceive, that's really setting your body up to, get back into a more normal state of homeostasis, and then allowing also your body the time to replenish. And that time to replenish also should be where you are consuming foods that are as clean as possible, that are ideally prepared with love, whether that's by you or at a restaurant or wherever it is that you get your food. Doing your best to be in as clean of a state as possible with as little chemical disruptors coming in through any of your sense organs or through your skin as possible. And so it really is like, sometimes it means people going through their cleaning supplies and like getting rid of the really intense chemicals, or looking at their laundry detergent and shifting their laundry detergent so they don't have those xenochemicals that are going to impact their hormones. And looking at their cosmetics and their shampoos and their body washes, all of those things which can ultimately disrupt the way that our hormones work in our body. So it can be like a whole overhaul of your lifestyle in order to set yourself up for the ideal home for a baby to be conceived into and grown.
Really helpful, really practical stuff of what we can do. And before I had started this call with you, I was sitting in my meditation and I heard, I've been moving, and my listeners know this past 2 months have been filled with change and the unexpected and heartbreak and healing. And I try to use every experience to the fullest, right? Like, let's really see what's underneath the surface here. And it's one of the first things that goes to the wayside when we're in the Vitamix of life is, for me at least, that part of my life that's been really important, which is cooking for myself. And I just have not had the ability. And I noticed this huge difference in my period this month. And oh my God, like all of these symptoms popping up. And as I was preparing to meet you, Ashlee, and go through our podcast, I got this insight in my meditation, and it said, I haven't sold another house that I'm trying to sell. And so half of my stuff's in one, half's in the other. And it said, go get your Instapot, which was still at the other house. And so I of course, rush over there with the knowledge. You are already laughing. And the reason she's laughing is Ashlee knows what I'm going to be doing with this, which is making khichdi. And I can do a 5 or 7 day little khichdi cleanse, which has been on the agenda, but life sometimes happens. And because I know, and sometimes I forget, but deep down, I know just that mono diet of mung beans, rice, ghee, and vegetables for the most part, and sometimes fruits and seeds, but it is amazing at how much that clarifies my vision. And I mean, literally, but spiritually, and also in the gut. And so I think if I were working with a woman who wanted to get pregnant, the first thing that I would say is consider doing a short or long cleanse. And certainly getting those products out of our lives is super important. And the other thing I want to highlight that you said, Ashlee, is how important it is for the other partner to do this as well. One of my dear friends, is going through a conception journey, and she's done Ayurveda school, she's one of us. And then her partner has had to really look at some of his lifestyle habits and choices. And he's been willing to do that, but it can be challenging when your partner might have a completely different lifestyle than you. How have you, in your experience of working with people, seen that kind of be successful? And maybe when you haven't, and what can a person do?
Yeah, I mean, I could use myself as a
Okay,
example,
good.
like when it's like not ideal.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I was trying to conceive for a really long time. It took us like 6 years to conceive. So I was doing everything on my end. I was doing all the things, but my husband drinks beer and sometimes he would smoke spliffs.
I'm literally understanding this very much. Okay.
Really?
And I like never drink and never smoke. Oh, I'm so great. But like, I just thought it's not a part of my life, you know?
Yeah. And it's hard when you're like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm happy to not have those things in my life. When we finally did conceive, which was like eventually when I was like not planning on conceiving, like I was like, I'm just going to set that aside for a while because I was doing this other Ayurvedic program. And that was when we conceived. And so I ended up having preeclampsia, and preeclampsia, it was diagnosed towards like at 39 weeks gestation. And there's a strong correlation with the health of the father for preeclampsia. And so for a long time, I was just like beating myself up because I knew, like, or I knew, like, I thought I knew that I was doing all the right things. And I think that's a really common thing that happens for a lot of us that are like health conscious. And then we end up having these specific things that come up during our pregnancies. And part of that probably was that, like, is that I went into my pregnancy with the doshas in an abnormal state. And then I had also his influence, which led to preeclampsia developing in my body. And so it was just like, it was helpful for me to understand that there is a strong paternal influence on that specific diagnosis and what happens. And so it helped me to alleviate some of the stress that I was putting on myself and the responsibility that I was carrying for myself, or to have that happen, to have me have that diagnosis of that health condition happen. Sometimes you just have no control, right? Like whether if you're really wanting to get pregnant and you are planning to get pregnant, and if your partner's unwilling, but you're still wanting to get pregnant and you're getting, like, you're feeling your biological clock ticking, sometimes that's just what happens, right? Also, there are definitely like couples that I've worked with where their partner was fully on board. And so they would do like a cleanse together. They did like a Khichdi cleanse together, and they shifted their dietary patterns. They shifted their lifestyle patterns, and then it facilitated and supported them finally and eventually getting pregnant and having a smooth and easy transition through their pregnancy. So I think that, like everything with relationships, communication is so incredibly important. And sometimes with partners, it's really helpful to have an outside person who's guiding the process, because a lot of times, especially if there's any stuff within the relationship, communication stuff or communication challenges, sometimes it's hard for partners to hear when their partner who's trying to conceive is telling them, these are the things that you need to do.
Yeah.
Having that outside support.
I think that's so important that you're bringing that up about, I'm going to see if we can put a link to our free cleanse in the notes, just so people who are listening, we can help you totally for free. We'll give you that basic cleanse. But also that one of the things that I see with students is there can be this pressure that we put on ourselves, to the guilt that we feel when things don't go right in our bodies, especially people who are attempting to conceive. So much of the burden is placed on women, and to actually hear that, there can be conditions that aren't even related to you that are affecting you. And, Ashlee, you're one of our beloved teachers, and we bring in these amazing experts like you precisely because this is your heart's passion. And then I get to do mine. And so as you're speaking, I'm putting all the dots together around the like bigger philosophical karmic implications of partnership and yin and yang, semen and egg coming together, the duality of opposites, in the way that in the yogini's body, she does this on her own. And when you do it with someone else, you're inviting in the totality of all of their koshic layers of being to literally be inside of you and to create something new. And like, I think about these old tantric texts that would say, from both the Taoist as well as the Ayurvedic tradition, choose your partner wisely, you take on their karma. Do you want to be like the person that you are sleeping with? And for your studies, Ashlee, do you want your child to take on the karma of the person that you're sleeping with? And for me, and for so many people on the planet right now, the answer is hell no.
Totally.
and that's okay. And like, that's where the grace and the tantra comes in of, and no one out there is perfect. And most of our men are going to be drinking beers and smoking weed. Like, let's be honest. And like, so like the compassion of also knowing that Thich Nhat Hanh says, I do not wish that my child does not suffer, because it is the suffering that creates the compassion in my child. And so I think you and I can sense, share this love for Ayurveda and the pristine perfection of the sacred window, and then the reality of life. And so maybe just tell us, you're lead teachers at another school called the Sacred Window, which I had the pleasure of being a part of a few weeks ago. And as you guide women in the sacred window, how can you really support this love of the pristine window with the acknowledgement and surrender to the bullshit that is our life?
I love how you put all that together.
Okay, did I do a good job? All right, good.
That was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so what we talk about at the Center for Sacred Window Studies a lot is we have like our guiding principles are the mother principles. And one of the mother principles is flexibility.
Mm.
One of them is flexibility, and the other one is compassion and deep listening. There's like 7 or 8 of them. I can't remember the number, but our goal in teaching people how to care for postpartum families, and then for them to teach the families, is to use those principles as their guiding light. And so we have, like you said, we have like our ideal, like the pristine, like this is, in an ideal world, we would do this. And
we would be drinking bone broth and getting our skin rubbed with sesame oil by our grandmother,
Yes, totally. And we would have freshly prepared meals 3 times a day. And we would never eat leftovers, and, like all of the things that we have within our dinacharya of Ayurveda, like our daily practices that are supportive for our health. And we would do all of them, which, especially as a mother, like it's rare that I do all of my dinacharya. It's like once a week if I'm lucky,
I love that. Thank God.
Yeah. So we really try to emphasize like sitting in our hearts, being connected to our intuition, and being flexible and looking at what we have available in front of us and bringing in the qualities however we can. And that's how we work with mamas and families too, is like I go into a family's house and I see that the mama ate toast for breakfast and she's constipated and the TV's on and like there's kind of dirty dishes spread around, so like I go into that space and I'm just like seeing what's happening, and then I'm gonna like do my magic, which is like to pick up all of those dirty dishes and clear them out, maybe to like open a window to let some fresh air come in because it's a little stale in there, finding some oats in the pantry and making some oatmeal that's really like unctuous and soft, turning down the TV, or if no one's watching it, maybe even turning it off and maybe turning on some music that she loves instead. And so we're like assessing the reality of what's happening, and we're bringing in the qualities as best we can based on ultimately what works for that person and that family. So really understanding the qualities of that person, their constitution, but also like the quality of the family is a really important part of this work, and meeting people where they're at, because we can't go into a person's house where they're used to eating McDonald's and be like, here's khichdi. You can, but sometimes their bodies are like, what is this? Or their taste buds are like, what is this? I'm not going to eat this thing. The texture is weird. And so you have to like find the thing that's going to provide the qualities, like maybe like chicken noodle soup is going to be the thing that's going to be really deeply nourishing to that person and easy for their body to digest. And it's going to be similar to the can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup that they eat from their pantry, but it's going to be freshly prepared. And so that's bring in that we start to like shift, and then hopefully we provide them with the recipe so that if they have the capacity later on after their sacred window is done, then they have, they're taught to cook. They have the opportunity to actually experience it and make it themselves.
Yeah, I find so often people get so caught in the Ayurveda rule book that they skip over the basics. Like, we are so far gone from our mother roots, whatever our ethnic background is. We have these mother lineages that had a beautiful recipes and, a tradition of cooking, and to just get women or anyone back in the kitchen. And I told the students a couple years ago, just every day, chop vegetables, just chop some vegetables, cook them, make a salad, just chop vegetables, and then get an Instapot or get a slow cooker, because there are these miniature, and I'm making this up in front of you, but I think you'll agree. There's also these sacred windows during a woman's menstrual cycle. And so I know for me, during the day before, and especially the first 2 days of my period, I do not want to cook. And so having that Instapot where you just throw everything in, the ghee, the spices, the veggies, everything, and you push a button, it's literally easier than ordering DoorDash. But many people don't know about that. And so just to help people understand that there is a way to do this in 10 or 15 minutes every morning and have a hot meal through the rest of the day, that is doable. I think for most people, even the busiest mom or working gal, or those resources we actually do have with modern technology now. I think a good thing that we could share with people, if you're cool with it, Ashlee, is you teach our postpartum and prenatal class at Shakti School. You're fast becoming one of our most popular teachers and favorite courses. And we get a ton of feedback about how beneficial and how practical and how compassionate, because there can be a lot of feeling of guilt, especially people who are trying to get pregnant and can't, or new moms who are like, I suck at all the Ayurveda routines. And I always tell new moms in the tradition, you're not meant to even do your mantras, because just rocking your baby to sleep with a lullaby is worth 1,008 mantras. So your mantra and your practice will be there for you after your 2-year-old is, grown. But my point with all this is, what are some of the foods specifically that we could maybe leave listeners with if they want to specifically build their ojas in that sacred window period?
Yeah, great question. And I love food. It's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things. One of the things that I love to make, and I think you have recipes similar to this too, Katie, are nourishing beverages. So you can take any type of nut or seed, and if you soak them, they're going to be easier to blend. But you take a handful of a nut or seed, and if it's almonds, I typically peel the almonds, and you throw that in the blender with 2 to 4 dates, depending upon your sweet preference, a big tablespoon plus of ghee or coconut oil or whatever fat you love. And then spices. So depending upon the flavor combination that I'm wanting, you can also do different dried fruit. So it doesn't have to be dates. So depending upon what you have, you could do raisins, or you could do, I've even done dried mangoes and pumpkin seeds is delicious together.
Mango and pumpkin?
Pumpkin seeds, yeah.
Oh, but yeah, it's working for me. I taste it in my mind. Yes.
Yeah, it's delicious. It's delicious. And then you add spices. So half of a teaspoon to a teaspoon total of spices, cardamom, cinnamon, fresh ginger or powdered ginger, whatever you have. If you're trying to boost milk production, then I'll sometimes throw in half of a teaspoon of fennel. But that's only if people like the flavor of fennel, because it has a strong, flavor, kind of like black licorice. Mm-hmm. And then you can add other things into that too. So if somebody is drinking collagen, like the powdered collagen, I'll put collagen into there. If they're into maca or shatavari or ashwagandha and their digestion is strong enough, their Agni is strong enough, then I'll put half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of that in there. You can also add chia seeds. So if you're having constipation, the chia seeds can help. So add like a half of a tablespoon to a tablespoon of chia seeds, and then add 2 to 4 cups of freshly boiled hot water. And I say 2 to 4 cups because depending upon the texture that you like, if you do 2 cups, it's going to be pretty thick. If you do 4 cups, it's going to be thinner, more like a drinkable beverage, thinner to drink versus a thick mouthfeel. And then you blend that up. So blend that up in the blender. And usually kids also love this and partners also love this. So it's a beverage that is excellent for especially the fall and the winter. If you're postpartum, it's great for any time. And if you're pregnant also, it's great for any time. So
I'm sitting here not pregnant nor wanting to be ever again. And let me tell you, I want to drink this. So this could be a good fall beverage for anyone, it seems, but this just so happens to also be one of the key nourishing nectars, if you will, for women during this period.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So anybody could drink it.
Anybody can drink it for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And usually again, partners, like whenever I make it for people postpartum, because that's usually when I'm making it for people is postpartum. In their houses, the partners are like, this is amazing. And I'm like, yes, like everybody needs a religious
Ashlee, you actually go into their houses and help them. That's amazing. I'm like, will you come over to my house? I birthed a book. I birthed a school. I birthed a new house. I love this idea of like, doula. Hey guys, don't worry. I'm not going to steal her from the women that actually need her. But like, I just had like a business idea. It's like doulas for those that like are birthing things as well as babies. Like, I think that might lead us in, well, okay, so there's that, but I realized you might have a couple more foods for us that I don't want to miss.
Yeah. I mean, so bone broth, like you mentioned earlier, is excellent. It's excellent for vata dosha. So anytime there's change and shifts happening, which postpartum, there's huge change and shifts happening, bone broth is an excellent food. And it's actually the first food that the Charaka Samhita says that a postpartum person should have.
Really?
Bone broth. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought this was like a new thing that we were kind of bringing into Ayurveda, but it actually says bone broth. That's amazing.
Well, technically it says meat broth muscle meat broth, but I think what they really mean is bone broth because that's going to be the deeper tissues.
Amazing. I need to make bone broth. That's amazing.
Yes, you do. You do, especially since you're moving.
Well, I'm going to just be selfish for a second, but I think it's going to benefit everybody listening. This experience, oh, by the way, all this stuff was going on for me relationally, personally, and I was moving. And by the way, I got COVID and it was all during the exact same 3-week period. And I'm on the other side of it now. I can feel my vital energy coming back, but I can feel that deep depletion and I feel so dehydrated, Ashlee. It's like I put all the things I know in my body. And as you're talking about the hot mango nut beverage and the bone broth, I'm realizing, oh, I haven't had either of those. So I think the vata dosha that a mother experiences during her birthing process, people don't realize that vata dosha is huge and it dries things out and it dries out the nervous system. The myelin sheath of the nerves is depleted. And so anyways, bone broths, fatty diets, these types of like nuts and dates and figs and things are really, really important for hydration.
Yeah. And also electrolytes are incredibly important. And so having like coconut water is excellent too. And also if you have like a good electrolyte powder that doesn't have a lot of weird stuff in it, that is super important. It's super important during pregnancy. It's super important postpartum when you're drinking tons of water in order to create breast milk, because we get electrolyte imbalances that happen when we're just like flushing our system with all of that water. And it's also important for humans because we need electrolytes. And so you can make your own electrolyte mix by doing a little bit of juice and some water and a pinch of Himalayan sea salt or like a sea salt that still has all of the minerals intact to it. And then if you have some magnesium and potassium that you could add into that as well, that's super beneficial, Katie, if you aren't already having.
Yeah, let's let this be all about me, the person that's not having a baby anytime.
So like you said, you just birth a whole bunch of other things. So it's a sacred window for you too.
And I think it's so important, women that are listening to this who aren't maybe interested in getting pregnant, that this is still for you. The beauty of Ayurveda is that what we do to support these new mamas is like also just what we do to support people. And it's taken to like a bigger degree, but this really is just good ojas, resiliency and vitality and ojas, the feeling of being held and nurtured. Like old people need this, everybody needs this. Okay. But anyway, continue, my love.
Okay, so the other thing that's really beneficial in ojas building are things that build the body. So grains, root vegetables, all of those things, meat, fat, like you mentioned. Fat is incredibly important because it's one of the best ways to counteract that dry quality, that light quality of vata dosha. So anytime we're having vata dosha in that elevated state and we're all moving into fall in the northern hemisphere, like vata dosha is in that shift and we're going into that drier quality and time period. And so having more unctuous, oily, soupy foods are the things that are going to be easier for our body to process, and it's going to help our bodies to retain moisture. So soups, gruels, chicken congee is excellent for any time that we are feeling depleted. So it's kind of like the Asian version of chicken noodle soup and also of khichdi. So
Khichdi. Yeah, it's like khichdi plus chicken.
yeah, totally.
I remember one of my boyfriends in the past was like, "Can we add a ribeye to this khichdi? It'd be great." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're such an American."
Yeah.
Can we add a ribeye to the khichdi? That might be the title of this podcast.
I like that. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, anything that is easy for your body to digest and process, but that's also building and nourishing to the body is going to be beneficial. And ultimately, ojas building, so long as our Agni is strong enough. And so that's one thing that we didn't really talk about specifically is how we digest, the strength of our appetite, how we digest, and how our body assimilates the nutrients that we're taking in is incredibly important. That's the first thing that we actually focus on when we are looking at any time that we're having these huge shifts too. So in the postpartum, we're really focusing on building up that digestive fire so that we can digest all of these more nourishing building foods, because if we can't digest it, then we're going to be building up ama, or unprocessed or improperly processed food in our body. And that's not going to be helpful for us or for our babies, or if we're not pregnant, it's not going to be helpful for our health and well-being in the long run. So that's super important and key to make sure that we're looking at, like, are we hungry? Is our appetite strong enough? And if not, ginger tea, black pepper, all the digestive spices, even like an herbal chai is an excellent way to help ignite that digestive fire so that we can digest those other foods. And if somebody's drinking bone broth, like having a couple cranks of black pepper in there, that's going to be an excellent way to both nourish their bodies as well as to make sure that their appetite is strong enough and their body is able to digest all of those more heavy building foods in the body.
Well, I know everybody's getting so much out of this, and we're just so happy to have you at Shakti School. And I know you go way more in depth with all of this in your courses. You've also been so generous to offer us a little free course with you. And we will definitely include that in the show notes so people can, if they are interested in knowing you more, take a look at that. I guess to close, I think I want to highlight in this last question just the importance of the we and the whole journey that can feel very scary, solo, that people understand the real need for women to be supported by their communities. It does take a village. And I think Westerners in particular, so many of us feel so isolated in this experience. And so what can a woman do when she feels like she's alone in this, who may not have, through whatever karmic journey she's on, the support that she really needs?
Yeah, that's such an important question. Ultimately, my goal, like with the people that I work with, is to help to facilitate that community during their pregnancy so that when they step into their postpartum, they have their village or they have their people around them. But just like you're saying, that's not always possible for a lot of people. And sometimes people move locations when they're pregnant and then they have their baby and they literally know nobody. And so a couple things. Having community in different ways, because we have so many people that have dispersed, is important. So even if somebody has moved, they can still have their either telephone or their virtual or their text community of people that they can call upon and be in communication with. Because sometimes what we need is someone just to hear us and be like, I hear you and I love you and I'm here with you, even though I'm not physically there. I'm here. The other piece to that is that because we have grown up so isolated in these weird isolated bubbles of our own families, and we think that that's how it's supposed to be, it requires us to be a little bit brave and courageous and to be willing to step out of that. And so most communities have some forms of mothers groups or new parent groups or postpartum yoga classes or postpartum Pilates classes, like other places where there are people in similar, whether that's a month postpartum or 3 years postpartum or whatever, but where they gather and come together. And so it's important for each of us to find out what those resources are in our communities. And then just to take that courageous step of putting ourselves out there and going to those places. Also, there are professionals like myself who do Ayurvedic postpartum care or conscious postpartum care or innate providers. There's a variety of different people, or just postpartum doulas in general, that are skilled at holding space for people. And they also are resource gatherers. And so postpartum doulas are excellent people to connect with in order to find out where those postpartum groups are happening and what postpartum Pilates classes are available to you in whatever community you're in. So even if you're not necessarily planning to hire a postpartum doula or postpartum professionals, they can connect you to the resources that are in your community so that you can have access to them. And then the other thing is that there are now all of these really cool online groups. Like in my community, there's a nonprofit called The Nest, and I'm part of The Nest and on the board of it. And we have an online virtual 4th trimester group. And then there's continuing virtual parenting groups that go all the way up to age 5. And they're led by an awesome facilitator who's an IBCLC. She's a lactation consultant and has just a ton of experience working with postpartum families. And so Katie, I can send you the link or the information to that, because the 4th trimester group specifically is free to anybody. So anyone from anywhere can join that group. And it's a way to not feel like you're alone in your experience, because again, most of us just haven't had a baby, if it's your first baby, and you just don't know. And so sometimes you think that whatever your experience is crazy and weird and abnormal, but really it's most people that are postpartum are experiencing something similar. So yeah, I think part of it is us being willing to shift that paradigm and being a willing participant in transforming the way postpartum culture and the culture around us supports us. And also when we receive postpartum care, say we hire a postpartum doula and no one in our family had ever hired a postpartum doula before. And sometimes there's pushback from family. Families are well, I didn't do that. I got up after 2 weeks and I was doing the grocery shopping and I'm blah, blah, blah. That's something that really happens a lot of times. And It makes postpartum people feel really bad. But also there's deep healing in that. And so when they see that you, the person that hires the postpartum help or has family or friends or whoever that's willing to come in and cook and help clean and do all of those things, it begins to shift the culture around you, your family friend culture, and then that bubbles out, right? So as each person changes and shifts the way they receive postpartum care, the people that are around them then have permission to do the same.
Same.
Or when grandkids have a baby, they're oh, there's these
Exactly.
doulas.
I love that you brought this up. It requires bravery to make yourself vulnerable and join a new community. That is not easy as an adult to make new friends. And B, your daughter is going to see you receiving this and see that it's okay and normal and good and mommy got this. So yeah, we see this all the time with the women at Shakti School where for any of these practices, I know my mom looks at me and she's like, oh my God, I wish, just laying around, meditating, rubbing oil on your body. And I'm like, yeah, actually. Wow. What a great resource. The Nest. We'll make sure to include that for women. And then, yeah, Ashlee, I feel like we could talk for hours, and I'm so glad that we found you and that actually you were brought to us as a highly recommended teacher, and that our students get the gift of being around you for what for many of them is such a an important part of their lives. And thank you for the work that you do in the world. And we just love and honor you and your lineages that you bring to this, I'm sure, are beyond just the Ayurvedic. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure. It really is.
All right, Ashlee. Well, we'll put all the links to your connections in the show notes, guys. We'll put the cleanse and the nest and the sacred window. And of course, as always, last chance to get in for early bird level 1 is happening this January. Ashlee will be a part of it. You'll get to spend 6 hours with this woman. Thank you, Ashlee. And thank you, listeners. Thank you. A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini, who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.